thank you very much for making the time to be here with us. Okay, colleagues, I think that we reach 20. Maybe let us start. And then from there, the other colleagues will be joining us during the event. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and partners, and representatives from different countries and focal points, on behalf of the GPE KICS Africa Consortium partners, which includes particularly, let's say, UNESCO International Institute for Capacity Building in Africa. We have Africa Union Commission, and then we have UNICEF Eastern and Southern Africa region. I would like to welcome you and thank you again for making the time to attend today's learning event. Our topic today will be on preventing school-related gender-based violence. And this appears like a kind of follow-up of the roundtable that you already had with our colleagues from UNESCO IICBA last month on reaching and teaching the girls child in COVID-19. As you may already know, just like a reminder, the GPE KICS is an initiative established with GPE funds to collect, generate, and share evidences, knowledge, and innovations across 19 Africa Anglophone countries for education policy formulation and implementation. In fact, the focus is on 6 thematic areas, including learning assessment, teaching and learning, early childhood education, gender equality, leaving no one behind, and the data challenge. The topic of today, of course, fall into the framework of the gender equality, and then we will be focusing on the gender violence in school. We have very excellent speakers, experts, country representatives that will take us through the subject, starting with a kind of overview of gender-based violence in schools, following by some country experiences, and then we will have at the end a kind of open discussion to reflect on how to prevent and to respond to it before closing. So, colleagues, on that note, I would like to invite our colleague, Mona Aika, to provide a few opening remarks. You know, Mrs. Mona is a child protection specialist at UNICEF Eastern and Southern Africa Regional Office, so next to my door here. So thank you again, dear Mona, over to you. You have the floor for the welcoming remark.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be delivering the opening remarks on this important webinar on preventing school-related gender-based violence, bringing together participants to share promising country practices and experiences, as well as brainstorming solutions to end violence in schools. Last week, UNICEF Eastern and Southern Africa region, and in particular the education and child protection teams, we had a webinar on the rollout of the UNICEF Global Framework to End Violence in and around schools. And I'd like to share some of the key points that were raised during that webinar, which are very much useful and relevant to this webinar today. Starting off with some statistics, globally, UNICEF study finds that about half of 13 to 15-year-old students worldwide, that is 150 million of them, have said they experience violence such as physical fights or forms of bullying from their peers in and around school. And if I zoom down to the Eastern and Southern Africa region, Allow me to share a few statistics from 2 countries that were shared during the webinar on Safe to Learn. In Uganda, the baseline that was conducted in 2012, 74% of children experienced corporal punishment, and almost 78% of children have experienced sexual violence, and teachers were cited to be the main perpetrators. Moving on to South Africa, and this is the figures I'm about to share with you are based from the Optimus study on child abuse, violence, and neglect in South Africa. 19.7% of young people reported persistent bullying, and 21.4% of respondents reported having been threatened with violence. And in particular, sexual assault and rape cases were the highest among the female learners, with 7.6 of them reporting having been raped. So dear participants, violence permeates school environment. It is present. We also know that experiencing violence in childhood impacts lifelong health and well-being. It affects children's mental health and learning. So ending this violence is a priority for both child protection and education sectors. From the child protection perspective, all ministries of education have a legal and ethical obligation to protect children under their charge. And we also know that not many countries actually, not many countries are yet to put in place prevention and response mechanisms, in the school environment. The implementation of such, measures is a precondition to the achievement of the SDG 16.2, ending all forms of violence against children. And looking at the education perspective, the consequences of violence on children's attendance, and in particular retention and achievement, is well documented, particularly for the adolescent girls. An atmosphere of anxiety and fear in the classroom is the schoolyard, and on the way to school can undermine the quality of education for all children. So this really shows that the need for us to discuss solutions and find ways for us to end violence in and around schools. Globally, we have the Safe to Learn initiative, which is dedicated to ending violence in and through schools, so children are free to learn, thrive, and pursue their dreams. Safe to Learn presents an opportunity to unlock the multiple wins of ending violence in school, improving learning outcomes, better leveraging of investment in education, and raising awareness and change attitudes towards violence against children. In Eastern and Southern Africa, 3 countries have endorsed the Safe to Learn call to action, and these countries are Uganda, South Africa, and South Sudan. So their governments are showing the highest level of commitment to end violence in and around school. We have tools that are available, which can be used. We have the global programmatic framework and benchmarking tool. We also have the Safe to Learn diagnostic tool, which is a more detailed guide to conduct a rapid assessment so that you can actually be able to measure the change that you're trying to achieve. And as I conclude, it is important for us to come together, and I'm very pleased and thanking the organizers of this meeting, of this webinar, for bringing different participants coming together to discuss on the importance of ending violence in and around school, and noting that we have tools available. And I really look forward to the promising country case studies that will be presented later on. Thank you, and back to you, Beatrice.
Thank you very much, Mona. It's really great to hear these inspiring, welcoming words, and also the resources that you talk about in the introduction, appealing particularly to end the gender violence in school. So now it is my pleasure to welcome Sujatha to take us through an overview of gender-related, school-related gender-based violence. Mrs. Sujatha is education specialist at the UN Girl Education Initiative. And as what I know from her, she is a very strong, passionate advocate for gender equality. So, Mrs. Sujatha, welcome. Please take the floor for your presentation. You have 10 minutes. Over.
Good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you very much for inviting me to this very important forum. My name is Sujatha Bodaloy. As Bifit introduced me, I am an education specialist, and I also coordinate the Global Working Group to End School-Related Gender-Based Violence. This coalition of partners was formed in 2014, just around the margins of the development of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Framework for Action for Education. And through the advocacy of this group, for the first time within the education sector, we came to recognize that gender-based violence is a real issue and a barrier to girls' education and learning for all children. And so this coalition has been involved with advocacy, with providing resources, developing normative standards and tools around integrating school-related gender-based violence prevention in education. We are a member of the Safe to Learn Coalition. In fact, one of the founding members. So Safe to Learn, when it came to being in 2017, Ungai was part of the core members who formed the call to action and the Safe to Learn strategy. So today I'm here to speak a little bit about what we know about school-related gender-based violence and also provide some evidence-based practices that we've synthesized over the years, which are based on global programmatic reviews, as well as from learning exchanges such as this one, which we've held with across partners from civil society, academic institutions, ministries of education, education unions, youth networks at the regional level. So we've held regional learning symposia in Western Central Africa and Eastern Southern Africa. And then I will also be sharing some key resources and tools. Next slide, please. So what is school-related gender-based violence? It is any act or threat of sexual, physical, or psychological violence occurring in and around schools, perpetrated as a result of gender norms and stereotypes and enforced by unequal power dynamics. This is the definition that was endorsed through the UNESCO board in 2015, called Learn Without Fear. And for the first time, 52 member states of UNESCO actually recognized that school-related gender-based violence is a real threat. And the definition of including gender norms and stereotypes was really to put at the center of prevention that we have to be addressing the root causes of violence. So when you see the diagram on the right, you will see that there are linkages between physical violence, psychological violence, and sexual violence. And there are different acts which manifest in and around the school environment. So for example, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, social cohesion, sexual comments and jokes, and then on physical violence, corporal punishment, bullying, etc. And then in the middle, you see that some of these acts can be linked. So for example, a child experiencing corporal punishment at home or in the school can also become a perpetrator or a victim of bullying and sexual violence and harassment. So in order to have a comprehensive response, we need to understand that that these acts of violence are linked both in the school environment, but also as it occurs in the community, it can mirror in the school. Next slide, please. So global snapshot, Mona before me already presented some very stark data points. I want to say that data on school-related gender-based violence is not systematically collected across household-based surveys as well as school-based surveys. So what that means is that what we have is an estimation, and it's an estimation of the type of violence that occurs, but we don't have also information on to what extent it impacts girls and boys differently and how gender norms have an impact on the violence. So globally, 1 billion children experience some form of physical, sexual, or emotional violence, and much of that occurs in schools and at the hands of teachers. 60% of children aged 6 to 10 years report experience of emotional and physical violence from peers, and more than 10% of students experience sexual violence and harassment at school across 96 countries. Corporal punishment is legal in 67 countries still. And we know that even in countries where there are legal prohibitions or there is a ban, corporal punishment is used by teachers. Mona has said already the impact of school-related gender-based violence, so I won't go into that, but in terms of the mental health and learning outcomes and dropout, and it impacts girls more than boys in many instances. But the World Bank estimates that $11 trillion are lost in lifetime earnings due to lost learning, dropout, and poor mental and physical, psychosocial well-being. Next slide, please. So what makes violence gendered? I wanted to spend a little bit of time to unpack this because it's very important as ministries of education, when we're looking at violence in and around schools, to be also linking that with all the work that we do on promoting gender equality. So I've put just two examples here which have come through our learning meetings and dialogues with ministries of education as examples that could manifest in and around school. So the one on top is, I'll just read it out. A 13-year-old student is helping out with chores at her male teacher's house with her parents' permission. The teacher builds trust, becomes physically close, and then eventually forces her to have sex. The second one in the purple box, Abel is 15 years old. His classmates have started teasing him and telling him he is too much like a girl. At the end of the school day, his English teacher, Mrs. Mapenza, asks him to clean the blackboard. A student trips him up as he walks through the class. Abel trips and cries out, but the teacher tells him to stop being such a girl. So these examples, and there are many more examples of both boys and girls being impacted by school-related gender-based violence. And when we say that it is as a result of gender norms and stereotypes, what we want to say is that there are social constructs around how boys and girls are meant to behave. Boys are expected to be tough. They're expected to take physical beatings. And the data shows that they experience corporal punishment at higher rates than girls. Whereas girls are expected to be quiet, to be shy, not to speak up, and not participate. And they become more vulnerable to other forms of violence like psychological bullying, sexual violence, sexual abuse. So school-related gender-based violence impacts boys and girls differently. And if we want to challenge the existence of this type of violence, then we have to change those gender norms, which keep boys and girls confined within certain constructs. Next slide, please. So what works to prevent and respond to school-related gender-based violence? We've put down 6 areas of work here based on the evidence and good practice that we have synthesized on this area. So one is empowering teachers with skills, mentorship, and leadership support. Second is curricular approaches to shift harmful gender and social norms. Third, establishing safe and confidential, and I also want to add there, child-friendly and gender-sensitive reporting. Number 4 is applying a whole school approach. 5, investing in data collection and monitoring. And 6, integrating SRGBV prevention in education sector plans and policies. So I'll just go through a few examples of each of these in various contexts. Next slide, please. So number 1, empowering teachers to identify and respond to acts of SRGBV. Often what happens in programming around violence prevention and school-related gender-based violence is that teachers are given training, 2 days, 3 days, 4-day workshops, and then that is it. But the evidence tells us that we need to have continuous professional development and in-service training of teachers. And this is part of the education system anyway. But what we need to do is to be integrating SRGBV within those systems, such as in-service and continuous professional development trainings. Teachers need ongoing coaching, mentorship, and peer-to-peer support, especially because we are asking teachers to challenge certain norms and behaviors which are already prevalent in the community. And this research tells us that teachers are reluctant to do that because that puts them at risk, and it also puts students at risk. So they need the support and mentorship from community members, from the school leadership, in order to be able to challenge certain behaviors and norms in the school environment. The last one, working with education unions, is extremely important. What you see on the right, the picture is from a code of conduct from Ethiopia, which was developed by the Ministry of Education with the Ethiopian Teachers Association and disseminated widely across the country. Ethiopia, as you might know, also has gender desk officers, and so those officers were trained on what this code of conduct is, and then they disseminated the awareness of this code of conduct across the schools in Ethiopia. And that is critically important in order for teachers to be aware of what their professional code of ethics is. It also makes teachers aware of the sanctions and the punishments that can occur if they violate the code of conduct. Next slide, please. Second one, curricular approaches to shift harmful gender norms. There are some very good examples, but not too many, of how to integrate curricular approaches within the school curricula. One example is piloted by UNESCO called the Connect with Respect tool. It's a curricula for 11 to 14-year-old students. These are activity-based modules to support teachers to address gender norms. And this is being piloted in Zimbabwe, Zambia, Tanzania, and Malawi, I believe, at this time. There are also some good examples of integrating content on SRGBV in training modules on life skills, sexual and reproductive health and rights, and global citizenship, which already exist across many ministries of education curricula for teachers as well as for students. Curricula can also be delivered through extracurricular spaces and student clubs, and this has the most promising result in terms of effectiveness of passing information about gender norms and violence and how to protect oneself among students. Next slide, please. Establishing safe, confidential, child-friendly, and gender-sensitive reporting. Very critical to coordinate and collaborate with staff at Ministry of Education, Social Welfare, Health, gender at national, district, and school levels. And there is a good example from Namibia where the education sector worked closely with the Ministry of Gender Equality and Child Welfare, the Ministry of Health and Social Services, and the Ministry of Safety and Security to operationalize the National Safe Schools framework. There's also a good example of an innovative reporting system that was developed by UNICEF in Senegal. It's a phone-based app called Rapid Pro. And what they did was to train and involve community members, teachers, religious leaders, child service workers, child protection specialists, and students on how to use the app, how to report safely. And then they also establish referral mechanisms with local organizations and helplines, so that as the reporting occurred, they were also able to refer those survivors to the appropriate support systems. It's also important to, as we establish reporting, to improve the accountability of school inspectors, district education officials in monitoring school violence. Next slide, please. What you see on the right, the diagram is the minimum standards or framework for a whole school approach that was developed by UNGAI with many partners in 2018. We piloted this approach in Zimbabwe and currently with UNICEF Sierra Leone. And the 8 domains you will see are all linked to what we've already spoken about working with education staff and teachers, about establishing codes of conduct, about establishing reporting mechanisms and incident response, working with parents, and empowering children and young people to address, to challenge violence. At the center of that diagram, you will see it talks about working with school leadership and community engagement, which is one of the most critical factors. So the whole school approach, what it means is building strong connections between the school and the community. And through the education system, the best way to do it would be through the school management committees or the parent-teacher associations and the student councils. The diagram has a set of minimum standards, which we can share the resource for you to go through. It provides it talks about providing training to school leadership principals and head teachers, strengthening partnerships across, as I mentioned, parents and school staff through SMCs and PTAs, and engaging parents in awareness raising and prevention. The pilot that we did in Zimbabwe, as well as in the current one in Sierra Leone, has shown very promising results on involving the school community, especially the school leadership. When principals are on board, then a lot of things can change in the school environment. Next slide, please. The second to last one on data, which is critically important. There is right now a gap in data on SRGBV, and we need more investment and support so that ministries of education are able to collect data appropriately and in an ethical manner. As you will be aware that collecting sensitive information about violence from children and young people can be quite tricky, and it must take into account confidentiality and protection of the survivors. So doing it through the administrative data collection processes that ministries of education usually have may not always be the most appropriate. And it is therefore important to use a mix of qualitative and quantitative data. The table on the left that you see actually shows the different kinds of data that can be collected for us to get a good picture about school-related gender-based violence. We can use the education management information system process to collect data on how reporting systems in the school are working, how policies are being implemented, how active the student councils and SMCs are in violence prevention. So in a way, what I'm saying is that EMIS is a good way of monitoring how the system is working to prevent violence, but not such a good way of collecting the incidence of violence, because that becomes a more, there are many ethical considerations in that. And the last one, the most important one, is we have to start disaggregating data by gender, disability, and age at a minimum. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, when we did the synthesis of evidence, and when we were doing the learning exchanges at the regional level, we found that there is, the graph on the right, you will see that there is actually an increase in the number of countries that have integrated some form of SRGBV prevention or mention of school violence prevention policies or plans in their education strategies or education plans. So you'll see that quite a number of countries now actually mention this. Of course, we know that that doesn't necessarily mean that these activities are budgeted or that there is an action plan, or even that from the national level that there is anything happening at the district level or at the school level. And that's where more work needs to happen to coordinate across different ministries, coordinate with other civil society organizations, and also work with the district education offices to integrate SRGBV prevention more effectively. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, we need to be monitoring the key results and progress at all those different levels, and EMIS could be one way of doing it. I think I'm at the end. Next slide, please. I've just left there two links where you can find more resources. Mona already mentioned the Safe to Learn programmatic guidance, and I've also left there the link to the Ungai Resource Hub, which has the most up-to-date tools, resources, M&E resources on school-related gender-based violence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sujatha, for this excellent presentation. that give an overview of gender-related, school-related gender-based violence. Particularly the figures that you provide at the beginning of the presentation, even if they are coming from, let's say, estimates are really, really alarming. And thank you particularly for providing, I mean, some recommendation and some resources on how we can support and this silent problem in our schools. Colleagues, at this point, I would like to open the floor for 2 to 3 questions, but you can still continue posting your question in the chat box so that even if Sujatha did not have opportunity to respond here, she may be able to respond later, and then we can share the responses. So just maybe any question from anyone, 1 or 2 questions. I can see that we have a comment from Olive. Olive, you have the floor. Can you come in?
Yes, yes, I'm here.
Go ahead.
How are you?
Okay, go ahead. Good.
Yeah, my is and what I have observed mainly is that violence sometimes emanates from the families as well as the communities. And when I look at the participation of parents in schools, you find that it's either one gender that is coming to the school, and mostly the women are the ones supporting the children in the schools. And you find that most of them are actually experiencing violence silently, and they teach their children how to be silent in order to save their marriages or their partnerships. So I think we have a lot of work in terms of working with the parents and working with the communities, so that I think we can also, apart from, we can help our learners by, of course, rooting out the problem from where it is emanating, helping them, having discussions with parents, trying to research and find out what is happening in different communities, and then getting some strategies that can work. Some of these things are cultural. So we really have lots of work, but I'm not saying it's not doable. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Olive, for your comment. Marianne, would you like to come in for your question?
Yes, Faith, thank you. I enjoyed the presentation. I'm wondering, for low resource contexts that may struggle to recruit and retain teachers and train them in the first place, places where student-to-teacher ratios are very high, what can be done exactly to recruit and retain professional teachers who act according to these codes of conduct when it's very hard already to recruit and retain professional teachers? I'm wondering if there's any country that has an example, or that has an example of how to do this in low resource contexts where teachers have many responsibilities and many students to look after.
Okay, thank you very much, Maria. Sujatha, before you come in, let us take maybe the last one last question. It is from Janet. Janet, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you, Sujatha. Very informative presentation. I think from me is you spoke about EMIS not being the best way of collecting data on incidents of violence. I wanted to learn from you, from your experience and interacting with a lot of countries, what is the best and systematic and sustainable way of collecting data on incidences of violence so that we are up to date and responding based on current evidence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Janet. Colleagues, continue posting your question. We are running out of the time, I know, but Sujatha, let's go with these 3 questions, and then for the other question that may be coming in, I think that will give you opportunity to respond later via email so that we can send it back to the participant. Over to you. Thank you again, Sujatha.
Thank you so much for the great questions. The one on the teachers is a tricky one, and that's an education system issue as well, in terms of pupil-teacher ratios and the availability of trained teachers. What so from my experience, and also what the research says, is that if you want to work with what exists, then often, or in many, I don't want to say often, but in many systems there are now teachers like the guidance and counseling teachers, or auxiliary teachers, or support teachers, especially in low resource contexts where you don't have trained teachers. You often have what they call the support teachers, or community teachers, from volunteer teachers, I want to say, who are paid, but they're not paid as the MOE appointed teachers. So those are good resources for us to work with. In Zimbabwe, we worked in the low resource context, and the guidance and counseling teachers were a great resource because they had already received some form of training from the ministry on health and sexual and reproductive health and things like that. So I think it depends from context to context how we work with what we have. And especially, as I mentioned, on the work around teachers, it is really good practice to engage with education unions. Ungai has been working with the Education International for the last 5-6 years on integrating SRGBV within their core functioning. So through Education International and its unions across many countries. And that has been an effective way because unions themselves are now becoming aware of this issue, and the fact that protecting the rights of the child to a safe education is as important for the teachers' unions as protecting their own members. So they've come to kind of have certain policies within their own system on how to address this internally. On the question on EMIS and data, so drawing from the good experience or good practice from the violence against women and girls field, it always is recommended that prevalence figures are collected. So incidence and prevalence is collected over a certain period of time. And there are many data collection tools which collect prevalence data. So there's the Violence Against Children surveys, there is the school-based health survey, there is MIX, there are many global survey tools, and there is more advocacy. And also at the national level, there might be tools which collect information on violence on a periodic basis. And I think the advocacy needed is that we include information about schools in those big surveys which collect information on incidents. And so that at the EMIS level, we are collecting and monitoring how the system is working to address violence on a day-to-day basis. I don't know if that clarifies. I missed one. Did I miss another question?
No, I think that question was mostly a comment. Yeah, so maybe let us move ahead, and colleagues again continue posting the questions either for the presentation of Sujatha or the next presentation, so that we may be able to respond to them during this session, or maybe later when we finish. So thank you very much again, Sujatha, for the presentation. And then we have some very interesting comments that are coming from other organizations like FAWE, with the manual that has been developed to support training teachers. So this is very important to know. We will reach out to you later if you can share the resources that are available, because this forum, the objectives also is to collect all the resources that are available and then to share them with the countries for the policy formulation and implementation. Now, at this point, it is now time to hear from countries that I would like to thank here for agreeing to share their experience in preventing gender violence in school. First of all, let me welcome here Mrs. Albert Saka to share Malawi experience. Albert is Chief Officer if I don't do wrong, for school health and nutrition in Malawi Ministry of Education. So Albert, over to you. Welcome. You have 10 minutes for your presentation. Albert, are you there?
Yes, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me and my colleagues from Malawi to share our experiences regarding prevention of violence in primary schools in our country. So Malawi, just like the rest of the countries, have not been spared regarding the issue of violence in schools. And there are so many ways on how schools, together with different partners, are coming together to put up ways on how to address and violence as it occurs, but mainly the focus is now on prevention of violence. So I'll take you through this presentation, which we implement in some schools within our country. So based on the literature and the studies that have taken place, we have data that shows that, for example, in terms of sexual violence, 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 5 boys experience violence in schools. But also in terms of emotional violence, for example, we have 1 in every 3 boys and 1 in every 5 girls experiencing emotional abuse. So you just take note that we are going to share this presentation by the end of it all, and then you can be able to look at it clearly. So I will not be focusing on each and every line because of time constraints. So in terms of physical violence, about 80% of the girls reported to have been beaten by a teacher at one point in their school environment. So that's very alarming. So also about 56% of learners have experienced physical violence in school grounds, but also on the way to school. So in other words, just like in many countries, in Malawi also violence occurs within the school premises on the way to school, but also within the community. So that's why it's important to work collaboratively to address this issue. So in terms of reports, about 69% of our learners reported to have been bullied at school. So violence in this case involves learners themselves, teachers against learners, but also the general population per se. In terms of the effects, for sure, we know that if learners are experiencing violence in whatever form, that impacts negatively on the attainment of quality education. Therefore, learners' inability to concentrate is affected, leading to poor performance in terms of grades and leading to even dropout of the learners. But also, the other result is that high rates of mental distress, anxiety, as well as depression, but also it increases anger and hostility, leading to self-harming behaviors, sometimes even into suicide. But also physical violence results into physical injury, may lead learners into substance abuse, misuse, leading to preparation of STIs and HIV, including unwanted and early pregnancies. This eventually may force the learners later on when they grow up in the future to be perpetrators of violence and also to look at violence as a way of living, which is will have a very negative impact on their general life. Also, violence leads to absenteeism in schools and a lot of learners being dropping out. And at the end of it all, there's poor performance affecting learners' outcomes. Next. So after a study that was done in terms of violence, a framework was developed, which we use in the country in relation to Ujamaa, which is an organization that we work with in preventing violence within schools. So basically that framework is focusing on 3 main areas as we deal with violence. We have the prevention aspect, which UNICEF is mainly focusing on together with us as a ministry. Then we have response areas as well as referral to various services where learners can get support. So in terms of prevention, maybe in terms of figures, roughly in Malawi, we have roughly about 9.3 million learners, children, and out of those ones, about 5.7 million will be abused before they reach the age of 18, which is very alarming. But also about 3.4 million will tell someone to say they have been abused. Unfortunately, only about 300,000 may be able to see a professional service provider to provide maybe counseling based on the experiences that learners had previously. So in this case, therefore, shows that issues to do with violence is very require our collective efforts to address them. The major focus in this case is to address violence before it occurs. So zeroing in on prevention aspect. At the same time, for those that have already been abused, there is a need and focus to provide psychosocial counseling to make sure that they undergo proper mental health. Also, as we are doing this, we work hand in hand with various institutions, for example, the legal, the police, but also specialists in terms of psychosocial counseling. At the same time, we also make sure we promote PAs and families and several service providers to encourage learners to report so that cases are properly followed up and then properly addressed. Next. So we, as already highlighted to say, as government, we have been working hand in hand with different government institutions, for example, Ministry of Gender, Ministry of Health, the police, and Ministry of Justice. But we have also been working hand in hand with organizations like UJAMA to help address and prevent violence in schools. So there are three main arms that are focused on as we've been working to implement the prevention of violence and addressing issues of violence in schools. So the focus has been on self-empowerment, where we're trying to make all learners get empowered so that they are able to defend themselves, especially the girls, if they are attacked. But also, next, we are also promoting self-efficacy. At the same time, we're trying also to promote self-defense. So learners are being provided with skills that they're able to defend themselves in case they are attacked. So the main issue is to also take on board teachers together with the learners so that they understand, they help the learners acquire these skills and also help the learners teach their colleagues, because not everyone is taken on board because of several other issues. Would have loved if all the services are reached to every learner, but unfortunately that's not possible. So we encourage also learners to teach their colleagues so that almost every school acquires these skills. Next. So we have a 12-hour interactive empowerment instructions for the girls, which we provide. So it's theoretical, but also practical, making sure that there's a complete package of information. So it aims at empowering the girls to master a wide range of abuse and acquire techniques which they can use to protect themselves. So primarily the focus is on either verbal, which also incorporates physical where necessary. So the focus is to make sure that as the girls are being attacked, they should be able to acquire skills on how they can be able to protect themselves verbally. But if the situation gets out of hand, then they're supposed now to use physical skills to protect themselves. Next. So the physical one, the fight is the last option, but the first option is to make sure they negotiate, they shout, and then if all that fails, and then finally they're supposed to physically protect themselves. Next. So there are 6 approaches or stages that the curriculum for this that focuses on. So the first one is the verbal skills, where learners are encouraged to use their voice to voice out to prevent the perpetrator from attacking them. So they have to mention whatever area where the attacker wants to touch them, they voice it out. But also they have to, in terms of setting boundaries, they have to tell their male counterparts to say, I don't want you to touch me here, or I don't want you to be so close to me, so that they set their boundaries so that they don't encourage or perpetuate violence. So they are also supposed to make sure that, first of all, when they're being attacked, they're supposed to negotiate, know the skills of negotiating. So this is aims at delaying the attack, making sure as they are doing that, they are buying time so that they can also be able to get support from within, whoever is within reach. So then they're also supposed to provide warning, to warn the attacker about the consequences of whatever the attacker is planning to do to them. So they warn the attacker whether I will report you to the police, I will report you to my parents, I will report you to the school authorities. And as they're doing that, they're supposed to be naming the behavior that is happening. If the attacker is touching them on the breast, they're supposed to tell the attacker to stop touching them on the breast, because they're going to report the attacker. But if that fails, then they're supposed to now physically be able to attack the attacker. As they're doing that, they're supposed to be yelling out, calling for help, drawing attention to the rest of the people that are closer within the beach, within schools, or along the way to back home, or going to school. Next. So that's just an example of the skills, the physical skills that the girls acquire when they're about to protect themselves. Either they poke the attacker in the eyes, or they are taught to target areas that are going to make the attacker be unable to continue attacking them. So the girls are also encouraged to teach each other, and because there are other techniques that require the girls themselves teaching themselves, unlike somebody else. So they feel more comfortable to share among themselves and then teach the skills amongst themselves. Indeed, it has really bared fruits in our schools in terms of prevention of and reporting of violence whenever it occurs. Next. So in order to make sure that as we are dealing with prevention of violence, we have to target both genders. So boys are also taken on board. Boys and males also takes a very positive step in making sure that girls are protected. Of course, the violence might be for both boys and girls. So boys are also taught preserving positive gender norms. So these are the areas that the curriculum for boys focuses on. It also focuses on teaching, promoting respect between the boys and girls, so that the boys look at the girls as colleagues and be able to protect them in case there is an attack from anybody. Also, there's promotion of having courage. The boys are supposed to have the courage to protect the women and girls. because they know, they are taught the consequences or the negative impacts of violence on the girls and their education as well. So most boys that are part of this program like the approach so much, and are fully cooperating in promoting violence-free schools. So there's also teaching, there's also, boys are also supposed to encourage the girls to be able to be, to open up and report and seek further assistance, even from people outside the school environment, be it the police or the community leaders, etc. So it's a very collaborative approach. Next. So
Albert, can we wrap up very quickly? The time is running. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, so this basically, thank you so much for that. So this basically is the study that shows the importance of the percentage in terms of decrease in terms of violence that we did together with Ujama, who is our partner organization. So next slide. The next one is just as a way forward. So as a country, we take the interventions, we would like to take the interventions to a national scale, where every school should have such interventions, reaching every learner to create a conducive environment in this schooling process. So basically, there's need to make sure that we continue data collection and research, because this forms part and parcel of policy review to incorporate more issues of prevention of violence, even within the curricula, to make sure that within the education system, but also in general, all the laws and policies and standards incorporate new research findings as regards to prevention of violence in schools. But above that, this will help us to act as a resource tool to mobilize for more resources for implementing programs that are aiming at preventing violence in schools. Thank you so much for your attention. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Albert, for sharing this interesting experience from Malawi. Really useful. Colleagues, before we open the question and answer session, we have a plan to hear also from the Nigeria experience. Do we have a Nigeria representative online? Mr. Kime? No room online. Okay, so I would like just to suggest that maybe Hélène Cron take us just through the main point regarding what Nigeria, what to do to end gender-based violence in school from the Nigeria presentation. Over to you, Hélène.
Thank you so much. Actually, I have gone through the presentation rapidly just to extract the main points from this presentation. I am a UNICEF staff, so I won't be able to respond to any question, but just share with you what the Nigerian colleagues wanted to share with you. So next slide. So I think what they wanted to, next slide, please. What they would like to wanted to share with you, that there were some findings coming from an assessment on violence to children, and they showed that physical violence and psychological violence are very high, respectively 85% and 55% in violence against children in school, which is very alarming. So next slide, you can go next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide, please. So they have listed the different type of violence that children were experiencing over there in Nigeria, called corporal punishment, bullying, sexual violence. Next slide. So they show the different position that the children has been asked to do to like kind of punish them. Next slide. They were showing lots of very painful photos illustrating how children has been experiencing violence. Next slide. In school. Next slide. By teachers, humiliation, corporal punishment. Next slide. Bullying. Next slide. Next slide. I would like to go to the, so here in this table, they were saying that they are collecting data every 5 years, and they wanted to show that it's on the rise actually for the next 10 years. Next slide. Next slide. And I wanted to show you, next slide, the response of the government. Next slide. Yeah, so what has been the response in terms of SRGBV based on the evidence you have seen? So they have the government, the federal government has developed and adopted a national policy on safe, secure and violence-free schools in Nigeria. They have also developed support document to support the implementation of this policy, particularly a protocol for reporting cases, tools for reporting, referral and tracking the violence against children, with service provider child protection training manual and facilitators guide for the training manuals. They have also developed an integrated action plan focused on prevention and response to violence against children in school, and support the training of master trainer. Next slide. They have also identified now the next step and the gaps. So now what they would like, I mean, they have identified the following gaps, and particularly that they need to issue a policy statement regarding when pregnant girls should leave school and return, to officially halt the arbitrary expulsion of pregnant girls from school, but also arrangement for formal education provision to support pregnant girls who are away from school, and providing support for young mother returning to school, and safeguards against negative attitude towards them. And then lastly, an immediate end to pregnancy-based discrimination in school. So I'm going to stop there, but just it was just to kind of share the main content of the presentation from Nigeria. Over to you, Bayfit.
Okay, thank you very much, Hélène, and thank you also again, Albert, for the two presentations. I mean, the two experiences from Malawi and Nigeria. At this time, let me maybe open the floor for some few questions, maybe especially for Malawi, given that we don't have the representative from Nigeria here. So any question from anyone? I only see one question in the chat box for Malawi, which states that our boys also target for violence, but I think that this one was responded already by Janet. But any other question from anyone?
Yes.
Okay.
Not a question.
Okay, Olive, go ahead. Just 1 minute.
Yes. Yeah, it's good that we are discussing this violence in schools, but I'm really concerned that we all seem to break it down into manuals, guidelines, blah, 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 blah. But our learners are still suffering. And I think in Africa, I think that's what we have perfected. You know, doing manuals, doing guidelines, doing things, but no follow-up. So our learners are still suffering. I don't know what we need to do. Maybe we need to discuss another forum how we do more strategies on the ground to save our learners. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olive. I think that this was really good and relevant comment, just because we need to go beyond.
We don't hear you well.
Okay.
Not sure, is it from my side only?
Well, Bifid's connection, it's coming in and out.
Yeah, no, we don't hear you well. Maybe you will need to disconnect and reconnect. So maybe while you are disconnecting, yeah, maybe it's a network issue. Can I suggest to just take over while you are reconnecting? So maybe what I would like to suggest now is so we're going to the discussion, and particularly we would like to give the floor to the countries that representative of the countries that are now online and that would like to share their experience on gender-based violence, as well as the measure that ministries of education, together with the other ministries, have put in place to fight against this. But please, in case you have a participant have another question to the Malawi colleagues, please put it in the chat. I heard you, Janet. If someone would like to say something, and particularly I'm looking at Mona, if you want to say something on this holistic approach and how to come with a strategy that can incorporate social norms and community-based strategy to end violence against children, and particularly in school, but also in the community. If you want to say a few words, and if you are still online, I don't know if you are online, Mona, you can step in. No, she has left. But very critical point. Thank you, Janet, to raise this point. So we have around 20 minutes. I would like to give the opportunity to the other countries to step in and share their experience. So please, anyone who would like to share what is the Ministries of Education or government's response to gender school-related gender-based violence, please raise your hand. We have heard some good practices from Namibia. If someone from Namibia wants to take the floor for a few minutes just to explain what they have done and what has been the good practices and challenges, that would be helpful.
Good afternoon, colleague. Good afternoon, Helen. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm hoping that there'll be somebody from the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture to respond. If not, then I'll jump in. I see there's somebody from the Damara Lodge. That could be somebody from the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture. If they could respond, then I could come in, please. Thank you.
Thank you. If no one, I feel that I recognize Aone's voice. Please, maybe you can share what has been the intervention in Namibia.
Thank you so much, Helen, and good afternoon, everybody. And thank you also for the presenters who share some very good information in terms of what is happening for us to address gender-based violence within the school communities. For Namibia, I would like to start off by saying that the government, in particular, the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture, Ministry of Health and Social Services, as well as in some cases now the Ministry of Gender Equality and Child Welfare, work very closely together, where the government has established what is called a school health task force consisting of these key ministries, including also the UN, in particular UNESCO, UNFPA, UNICEF, and WHO, who are very key and active members of the National School Health Task Force. The National School Health Task Force also consists of other stakeholders, for example, the Namibian police and some other NGOs also working within our communities. So what the government has done, especially now with regard to COVID and the challenges faced by the lockdown, and when parents are at school or children are at home and so on, the task force has really come up with a strategy to address some of the challenges that have been identified for communities. For example, children who are supposed to be at home learning when the parents are at school, but then the issues of some of the children roaming on the streets, and then the issues of violence coming up, even violence against the girl child and so on, the abuse and so. So what the task force has done was to come up with some a communication strategy, focusing on really going on to mass media, radio, television, and also on the roads, really speaking about messages of gender-based violence in schools and around schools. The Namibian police, within the framework of the task force, came up with Be Safe Against COVID. Let's be safe against COVID or something like that, where they also went on to road shows, really talking about gender-based violence affecting especially the girl child. We have noticed a number of high rates in teenage pregnancies. The campaign has also focused on addressing this unintended learner pregnancies, where we have been working with two of our key also NGOs, where they went to 5 of the regions in Namibia, having reached close to 10,000 girls and adolescents, including also with a boy child, talking about the issues of abuse, the issues of bullying, the issues of even in some cases bringing in the aspects of what we call sugar daddies and so on. So the campaign has really been extensive in terms of really promoting access to information for the girl child, well, for both the boy and girl child, but the focus has really been on the girl child, because last year we saw close to 4,000 girls who fell pregnant. Some of them came back to school and some did not come back to school. And the campaign was also trying to see how can we help the girl child who is not in school to come back to school and for it to be supported. In addition to that, what the School Health Task Force also did during the year was to focus on addressing the issues of mental health and psychosocial support. With the Delta variant between May and August, Namibia lost a lot of people, over close to 4,000 people who died due to COVID, and some of these were also teachers or parents. So there were also a lot of mental health and psychosocial issues that were identified by the ministry that the country needed to focus on. So as a result, through the Integrated School Health Task Force, and again with the support of UNICEF, UNESCO, and UNFPA, we put together some resources and provided technical support and used some of the documents, and thanks again for the regional office, the publications that were shared on mental health, the training modules, which we then also used to provide training to life skills teachers, to school principals, to nurses, and to social workers in the 14 regions on how to address the specific issues when children are coming to address those issues of are coming to schools with psychosocial issues. So in terms of gender-based violence, I think we still have got a lot of challenges in the country, but what I could confidently say is with the commitment and political will by the 3 ministries to address gender-based violence in school, I think we are really, and with the support of technical support from the UN agencies, I think Namibia is definitely on the right track to provide support to this. But again, as I say, challenges are still there, but we are definitely addressing this with the support of also the NGOs in the country, who have got also more information in terms of how to work, especially with traditional and community leaders, because some of the gender-based violence issues are also ingrained within cultural beliefs and practices, where in some regions children are basically married off by the age of 15 and so. So these are the issues that we are also trying to say, how can we make sure that we also address the issues of culture and how culture can be used to really support the schools to mitigate all of these negative impacts of culture, especially on the girl child. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the rich sharing. Thank you so much for stepping in here. I see a hand coming from Lesotho, if I'm not mistaken. Don't say the name again, but please step in, colleagues from Lesotho.
It was Molapo Sekucheng.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you. I was struggling. I couldn't see where my mic was. Okay, then when I had raised my hand up, it was then when you were saying countries should also share what is the practice in their home countries. I would just want to say I concur with what has been said here, that the issue of school gender-based violence is a common phenomenon in all the African countries. Children still suffer, and we are not being seen as making a significant change, because it looks like it's something that we have lived with for so long that people seem to be reluctant to do away with it. However, from the point of political will, there is political will from our ministries, particularly the Ministry of Education and Training in my country is working hard to ensure that school becomes a better place for every child. Thank you so much.
Any measure or policies that your government has put in place, or good practices that you would like to share with the other colleagues?
Okay, thank you for giving me another opportunity. Yes, from the policy point, right from our Education Act, this issue is addressed. Then from there, a lot of policies from the Ministry of Education and Training, from the Ministry of Social Development, Ministry of Health, and Ministry of Gender, in collaboration with the partners, UNFPA, UNICEF, and UNESCO. There are some documentations that are meant to help and guide us to ensure that this monster is being got rid of. However, there are a lot of campaigns that the ministry officials do each time at school level, at the community level. The message is passed through to sensitize the people. We have also introduced, as like all other member countries, the life skills. In Lesotho here, it is life skills-based sexuality education as a subject. More of this are embedded in that. It is taught from grade 1 up to grade 11, and it is compulsory. It is meant to empower the youth. It is meant to empower the parents and the teachers to make sure that information, as information is power, is passed across, and measures are outlined that people should take should such incidences occur. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will have maybe an opportunity to hear from one other countries. I'm sorry, we're running a bit out of time. Please, any participant that who would like to share the country experience on how the government, ministries of education, together with the others ministries have been able to respond to violence in school. Please step in or raise your hand. There's someone from Uganda who would like to take the floor. I know we hear lots of good things from Uganda. No, nobody from Uganda? Or from another countries, please?
And maybe if I can just add again to what I indicated that I did not indicate, what we have been implementing also in Namibia is we've got this social accountability and school governance program. And within that, we have got a program for children, which is called an EduCircles program. And the EduCircles are a group of students or learners who come together. They identify an issue within their school environment and address that. Now the EduCircles have got to have a mentor teacher who is assigned by the school to support them. So some of the learners would, for example, identify violence as a challenge in within and around their school communities. Then they would focus on how to address that challenge as the learners supporting the schools. And in some cases, we've got schools where they've identified alcohol and drug abuse as a huge challenge in their school community. Then the learners, boys and girls, would come together with the support of the mentor teachers, and then they would address, that would be a program, that a project they put up for the year on how to tackle the issue of drug abuse in and around their schools. So we had also found this very innovative activity, because it is the learners themselves that address the issue. They would share the issue with their mentor teacher, and then the entire school community would support the learners to address that issue. One of them is, for example, where the girl child, when they were on their periods and they are being laughed at by the other boys or by other girls, then they would address that way. They would collect sanitary pads. The children would come together, collect sanitary pads, and then put them somewhere where the girls who cannot afford them can go and collect this. So the EduCircles program has really been playing a key role in addressing, for example, gender-based violence in schools or within the school communities. And in one of the communities where drug abuse was considered to be very high within that community, the school had also tried to tackle that, so that those drugs are not sold into schools, or their peers in schools are not taking drugs. So it's another activity that maybe colleagues could learn from what Namibia has done. Thanks, and over.
Thank you so much. I see two hands. One is from Olive in Kenya, and one is from our colleagues from Nigeria. Welcome, and I think unfortunately we don't have much time to give you the floor. We have been through your PowerPoint, but please take the floor now, and then we'll go to colleagues from Kenya for a few minutes. Mrs. Keme, over to you for only a few minutes, because we are closing, unfortunately. Oh, you are on mute right now.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'm really sorry I'm late. I think it's because of the time difference. I was in another training and I thought it was 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock Nigerian time. So I ran here only to discover that you've been on since. I'm sorry about that.
Apologies.
I'm really sorry. So I was just going to talk about a few things that have been put in place for Nigeria. And that is like the Violence Against Children Act, which is in place. And then the Safe School Initiative, which has also been passed. And there are manuals through which there is a step down of training so that it will be accepted across board. And then there is this community type of initiative where the communities will take charge of the schools, and there is vigilance to ensure that all molestation, all kidnapping and all that is taken care of. And then the children are also being sensitized on saying something when you know that something is wrong, because most of the time, what frightens them is when the children are threatened that if you say something, we will kill you. So we try to train them to say, if you don't say anything, that is when you will die. So there's a lot of sensitization, and the Federal Ministry of Education is also trying to establish a reporting system so that whenever anything is reported, it goes down from the school to the principal, to those necessary people who should know, and actions will be taken accordingly, instead of the children feeling threatened that they would be punished for saying something. And then there is also the Child Protection Act that is being followed so that it will be stepped down across the sector for everybody to know that there's something that is being done to ensure that every child, especially girls, have access to education. And then we are also looking at putting up strategies towards ensuring that girls who get pregnant somewhere along the line, or those who are molested or violated, that pregnancy will not deter you from accessing education. Despite the fact that you are pregnant, you should still have access. You can still go back to school. And then some states have gone further to say, as long as the child, the perpetrator, like if the girl that is violated is out of school, the boy who committed the crime should as well stay out of school for that same period. That is to serve as a deterrent, so that those boys who think that they can molest children or rape girls and the girls will go out of school, they themselves will also be punished. I think I can just stop there. I'm sorry once again.
Thank you so much, but I should say that we have taken 5 minutes for going through your PowerPoint, and we are really, thank you so much for that, and apologies once again. I'm gonna give you, I see 2 more hands. We are now at the end, and we have some closing remarks from our colleagues, Urai from FAWE. Please, 1 minute for each. Mrs. Olive Mbutia from Kenya, and
yes,
after that, Matu Yumkela. Thank you.
Yes, I just want to say about Kenya, I think in terms of policies, we are quite good. We have gender policy, we have the Children's Act. In fact, we have hotlines. But my worry, I mean, in terms of policy and guidelines, manuals, all those things, we are very good. We are very good at doing that. But still at the ground, we have a lot of work. They're suffering because who reports who to who? You see, parents are so disempowered. They don't want to go against teachers. We have even some girls, when they're impregnated, the teacher decides to marry, whether they are below 18 or some. So we still have some cultural issues, family issues, and also who is being reported to about this violence? Our police force. I think we really have a lot of work on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mrs. Fatou Yumkela, please. 1 minute. You are on mute, Mrs. Yumkela. All right, so let me then wrap up before coming back to Bayfit and for the closing remarks. So thank you so much for this discussion. It has been very rich. Unfortunately, it has been too short. We have heard lots of good practices in terms of policies, in terms of manuals, in terms also of campaign and media communication to really sensitize and try to make some change in terms of social norms and cultural issue. We have heard collaboration with religious and traditional leaders to try to impulse some shift at community level and at school level. And we have heard lots of also holistic approach and the whole school approach, engaging with leaders and teachers. So I think it has been reached, but we have lots of work to do. So I would like to say that we are going to share all the resources that the speakers have been talking about, particularly the two presentations from Malawi and Nigeria, but also the resource that coming from UNGAE, from FAWE, from UNICEF, from Safe to Learn initiative, and we will be happy to continue exchanging virtually. On that note, please over to you, Bayfit, if you are now okay with your connection.
Thank you very much, Hélène. I'm now okay with my connection. I think that you can hear me very well now. Again, colleagues, dear participants, thank you very much for your time, for all the sharing. I would like particularly to echo what you all said and what Hélène already wrapped up, and mention especially the comment from Olive that we need to go far beyond the policy, the guideline, but also to focus on the implementation, and then to make sure that we fight against the violence, the gender-based violence in school. So we are now at the end of our today's learning. Before we close, let us take 2 minutes to fill in the event survey questionnaire that our colleague Zamzam just put on the chat box. So please go ahead, just click on the link, and then this will be direct to you to the survey questionnaire. It just take 1-2 minutes. You just respond to the question. So this is the questionnaire that our colleague is just displaying on the screen here. You just respond to that. You just fill in, and as you are, filling in the questionnaire, I would like to invite our colleague Urai from FAWE for a few closing remarks. So FAWE, Urai, over to you.
Thank you so very much, Bifit, and good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. I'm bringing you greetings from Mrs. Martha Mwezi, who is FAWE Executive Director. I couldn't agree more with, I think it was Olive, who was telling us we need to walk the talk. We have a lot of at policy level, we have everything it takes. And yet the figures as shivering as Sujatha showed us, and also as our colleague from Malawi, who was presenting the experience of Malawi. I think that there is a lot that is being done, which is already very good. And Hélène, thank you for synthesizing the different programmatic areas in which we do have some quite promising experiences in our countries. To me, I think that where we need to do more, it is on teachers. Someone was mentioning gender transformative teacher training, and we just need to be aware of the daunting task. We have millions of teachers in the system. That is the stock. And UIS was telling us that in order for Sub-Saharan Africa to achieve SDG 4, we need 16 million additional more teachers. So now how do we go about training all these teachers in gender responsive pedagogy, in gender transformational leadership? That is a big challenge. We need to think about it. The FAWE manual has been mentioned. We are going online with it because we know that face-to-face training is just impossible because of the figures I've just mentioned. But we need to go even beyond that. And someone was telling in the chat that we also need to think about teachers' psychosocial well-being. And this is also something I think all of us in our programming, we need to pay attention to. I think that what is very important for me is we need to shift and to look at the issue in terms of child protection. And we also need to shift from managing the issue to preventing the issue. And that is where a very important stakeholder must come in across all our interventions. And this is the community. We do have sometimes programs targeting the communities, but I think they need to come across the board. As well, we need to be working with other ministries, with other sectors across the board. Thank you very much, everybody, for this very exciting learning event. It's been quite a learning curve. I'm hoping I'm speaking for all of us when I'm saying this. We all do something in SRGBV, and yet we still learn, and it's good that we are still learning. I am hoping that somewhere down the line, we wouldn't even need to have these learning events because we would have solved this issue. At least that's my, my hope for all of us. And let us not think of it as being an illusion, but a medium-term objective, which altogether we will be able to achieve. Thank you very much to the organizers for this very interesting event. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you very much to all the participants. Over to you, Bifit.
Thank you very much, Urai, for this inspiring closing remark. So, colleagues, I think that we are at the end now. We are closing now, but just to recall you to fill in the questionnaire that is displayed currently now on your screen. Just please take 1-2 minutes. This will be very important for us to better organize a similar event in the future. Thank you very much. Over. Bye-bye.
Thank you.